to another nation. This a we we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area.
Where we make sense of the news, Belize's only news review talk show. I'm the producer and host, Sister YaYa Marin Coleman, co-host, revolutionary from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and our guest this morning at the Breddah, first time I got my Breddah, Brother Will Guzman. I know I hear all about that. Good morning, brothers. How the morning?
Good morning. Good morning, Sister YaYa. Good morning to Dr. Will Guzman and to our listening audience. It's once again a pleasure to be on Sunday Review.
Indeed. Thanks. We're simulcasting on Crumb Radio, live streaming on Facebook and YouTube at XTV Belize. Brother Will Guzman, when I tell you no, I don't have no idea how happy I am to have this brother. When I talked before the show, I would know one another damn near 26 years. That long. But anyways, Brother Will, it's good to see you. I can't believe this is our moment for you right now. Tell us a little bit about yourself. In the era, make sure you put that you come from Puerto Rican lineage, and tell where I want to know about you before we have this reasoning this morning about Juneteenth, which is about the liberation of enslaved African descendants in the United States. So we want to know about you, Brother Will. Make me warm up to you before we get into this reasoning.
Well, greetings again, everyone. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on the Sunday Review. And as you indicated, we've known each other for many, many decades. Our days go back to our walkings on the campus of the highest of Seven Hills there at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. And it's been always an honor and a pleasure to interact with you, to break bread with you, and of course to reason with you. I like to say, as Ufo and Amente used to say, that I'm just a simple man from a humble village. Born and raised in the small town of Passaic, New Jersey, which is just outside of Newark. At that time was a small working class city of over 60,000 people. And I graduated from not only the public school system there, but I also went to Catholic school there as well, graduating from Passaic High School. And then after that, I moved away from the city to attend community college, and then to graduate from Florida A&M University, and went on to a couple other institutions of higher learning. And over the last 20 or 30 years, I've been in the field of higher education in a variety of roles, although primarily as a professor, where I've taught well over 6,500 students. But most recently, over the last 5 years, I've been an administrator. I've been at 3 institutions, HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and all the courses that I've taught have been dealing with the Black experience, primarily in the field of history. but in other areas as well, focusing on West Africa, South Africa, the Caribbean, and United States history, primarily after 1865. I've edited a couple books in African American history, two of which have been published in this past year on the history of peer review A&M University, which is an HBCU outside of Houston, Texas. And another is looking at the life of Emmett J. Scott, who was born and raised in Houston, Texas. And he went on to become chief of staff to Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee Institute. And then the fourth book is on Lawrence Nixon, the civil rights, looking at the civil rights movement in the borderlands of Texas, and looking at really the biography of an African American physician in El Paso, Texas, at the turn of the century. And just for the sake of relevancy and how it relates, I'm working on, and YaYa, you may get a kick out of this. I'm working on an edited book project on looking at the Black Power movement in the state of Florida. And of course, when you look at the Black Power movement in Florida, you have to look at the Black Power movement in the Caribbean, particularly in Trinidad, but the other parts of the Caribbean, of course, Jamaica and other islands. So that book will probably be out in 2 or 3 years. It's in infancy right now. We have the most of the draft chapters collected. Me, Kwesi Denzu, and Kenja McCrae are editing that project with the University Press of Florida, and we hope for it to be out by 2028, maybe early 2029. But anyways, that's an introduction of myself.
Thanks. But I always remember the story where you tell me that humble story. Well, we got at Disney World. It was through a newspaper. Tell me that story, because I want people to understand that you see people, but you don't know where people come from. And Will come from a working class family. Tell me that story, Will.
The story of my own family. Sure. It's funny you asked me that. My mom just turned 80 years old last Sunday, a week ago today. Her name is Norma Torres Burgos. She was born and raised in the rural district of Santa Isabel, Puerto Rico. And Santa Isabel is considered like the capital of agriculture in Puerto Rico. And there in that region has had historically, at least since the 1700s, major sugarcane plantations. And so my people, of course, come from that region, and in agriculture and in working. My own grandfather, for example, worked as a foreman as a blacksmith in a former sugarcane plantation up through the 50s and early 60s, in fact. My grandmother worked as not only as a homemaker, raising her 7 children, including my own mom, but also as she worked in a shoe factory. She also worked as the cook at the elementary school cafeteria, and she also worked as a seamstress. They eventually would move to downtown Santa Isabel, and Santa Isabel to this day is a very small town, about a 30 to 45 minutes away from Ponce being the second largest city there on the island. San Juan, of course, everyone's familiar with San Juan, the largest city on the island. But my mom graduated from John F. Kennedy High School there in Santa Isabel in 1965, and she would eventually move to the Melrose neighborhood, or the Melrose section of the South Bronx. She lived there for about a year and eventually made her way to Passaic, New Jersey in 1966. And she lived there in Passaic for over 60 years. In those 60 years, she worked for a number of employers, primarily for the local garment industry. Passaic had a very thriving garment industry. In fact, she belonged to 2 prominent unions in the garment industry, and she would sew pockets, and she would get about 5 to 10 cents per pocket. She was what you call a piecemeal seamstress, no different than her own mom, my grandmother, who I mentioned earlier, Amelia Burgos, who died, by the way, in 2003. She was in her early 90s when she died. But but eventually my mother would get a job as a teacher's assistant or a teacher's aide in the Passaic public school system. And fortunately, they had a union as well. And so when she retired in 2021, after working for 30 years as a public school teacher's aide assistant there, she was not only able to get her Social Security check from the U.S. federal government, but also get a very small pension from that union that she had been a member of for those 30 years. So I like to, be able to recount and state that we come from working class roots. We come from a working class family. I unfortunately or fortunately broke away from those working class roots and being able to graduate from college. I'm the first to graduate from college in my family and go on to earn a terminal degree in the field of history. And so obviously my mom is super proud of me, but one, of course, cannot forget those humble origins.
Respect. So Juneteenth, Brother Akko, what do you know about Juneteenth?
Well, Juneteenth is the U.S. version of what we may call emancipation in the Caribbean, even though the history is a bit different in that we had a proclamation, on August the 1st, and Juneteenth was different from my understanding of the history, in that in Texas it was delayed for a very long time. Even though the proclamation was passed, when the news got to Texas, it was pretty late. And so the holiday or the observation of emancipation, which is what it is, in the U.S., became centered around June 19th. But I'm sure my esteemed brother here will give us some more information regarding that. But that's my understanding of what Juneteenth is. Essentially, emancipation, and the observation of the Emancipation Proclamation in the U.S.
Brother Will, before I ask you your 2 cents on Juneteenth in the United States, it's very important that when we have these conversations, we preface that the enslavement of African people as chattel enslavement, that one interruption of we glorious civilization and story. So let's give it a leave it. About African people prior to enslavement, because it's always important that we start at the root of that conversation.
Sure. And thank you so much for bringing that up. It's extremely important to remind our audience that the totality of our experience and our identity is not simply wrapped up in the trauma that has occurred over the last 592 years. That we've had a glorious past prior to European colonialism and imperialism and enslavement. I often like to, whenever I do teach my introduction to African American history classes, I like to remind us, our students that we literally created time, right? Not only in measuring time, but also the concept of time. We've been around for millions of years, and that could be a very controversial statement for many, particularly those who profess to a particular religious faith, where they may think that humans and the earth has been around just for the last 10 or 20,000 years. And of course, that's a misnomer. Science, as well as our own ingenuity, we established ourselves millions of years ago. We began to leave the continent 100,000 years ago in order to populate the rest of the world. In other words, up until 100,000 years ago, the only human beings or the people in the world were found on the continent of Africa. And so in that 100,000-year journey, we began to populate the rest of the world. And in so doing, we gave the world not only humanity, but civilization. And here again, that unfortunately, especially for those right-wing conservative anti-Black movements that are proliferating throughout the world, that in itself could be a very controversial statement. But for those that know, or for those who are in the know, that is not such a controversial statement that we could proclaim that we gave the world humanity and civilization. Now, the term civilization, I think, becomes important because, at least according to the European worldview, they may see civilizations measured by how tall buildings are, or how far advanced technologically that they have gone. But in fact, my sense of civilization is not only in those kinds of very measurable ways and practices, but also a worldview that embraces our humanity, our ancestors, our culture, and our history. That, I think, goes a lot further in explaining how we are civilized, and the civilizations that we brought to the world. Now, that doesn't, of course, negate the fact that were we in conflict with each other, of course. But in terms of this institution of slavery, the slavery that we practice was not predicated on, it was not racialized, it was not generational, and of course, it required a sense of liberation, right? In other words, it was not perpetual. So those three characteristics make European slavery very distinct than the type of slavery that we had experienced among ourselves, and that it was racialized, perpetual, and generational. And so that, I think, speaks to that aspect of civilization in our humanity, right? It doesn't mean that I'm arguing that Europeans are uncivilized or non-human. What it does say, though, that there is an argument to be made for how we view humanity and civilization, and we set that bar. And so when we talk about our glorious past and the empires that we had created and the technological advancements that we made and the thousands of dialects and hundreds of languages that we had established, it says something in terms of how we treated our dead, how we treated our living, and how we treated each other, but also the institutions that we created in order to affirm ourselves and affirm our cultures. And so I'll just end on that note.
Big thanks, Brother William. Make I think more than one conversations we've had in the past. And I don't know who Brother Akko quote, Brother Akko got to our memory. Whew! Bigger than libraries. But Brother Akko, who you like quote would often say, when we talk about our African ancestors and ancestors being kidnapped and human trafficked, and when they find themselves in a human bondage, all we had was ourselves. Now, who may say that, Brother Akko?
C.L.R. James. Someone, was suggesting that because of the conditions, we had nothing, and his answer was no, we had ourselves. We came with ourselves. And the self was a reflection of a civilization. And he cited things like the fact that in Barbados, within years of coming to Barbados, Africans were running some of the plantation equipment, which means they had an understanding of engineering and so on. So that's what he was speaking about in terms of we came with ourselves. We had a knowledge, an inherent knowledge of science and mathematics and so on and so forth. But I want to ask Brother Will a question, if I may, Sister YaYa.
I can stop at yourself now. You got a co-host.
So my question is, I'll tell you the story. I went to Nicaragua in the 1980s, right? During the rule of the Sandinistas. I went to a conference there. And in my interaction with the people of Nicaragua, the name Roberto Clemente came up. As if he was, at that point, I think he was dead maybe 10 years. And people were speaking of him as if it was like 6 months ago. And so the reason I'm asking you this question is that Roberto Clemente was a Puerto Rican of African descent, distinctively African, not mestizo. And a lot of people in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean, other parts of the Caribbean, they are not familiar with who he was. So I wanted you to, if you may, talk about who Roberto Clemente, besides being a baseball player, what he represented for Puerto Rico.
Sure. Thank you for bringing him up. He's definitely one of the cultural icons of the island. He played, of course, for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was the first Puerto Rican to be admitted into the Baseball Hall of Fame there in Cooperstown, New York. And he was from the San Juan region. I want to say he was from Carolina, Puerto Rico, which is a suburb or a bedroom community of San Juan. And of course, as you've indicated, he had a profound impact on the people of Nicaragua, because I want to say it was in December of 1972, give or take a year or two. I may be off on the exact year, but it was in December 1992, maybe sometime that fall, could have been November or October, but nevertheless, he had just hit his 3,000th hit. And in baseball, to reach that milestone of 3,000 hits in a career was extremely significant. It almost guaranteed you to enter the Hall of Fame. But nevertheless, he had just hit his 3,000th hit just a few weeks or a few months earlier at the end of that season. But Nicaragua had experienced some type of natural disaster. It was
an earthquake.
An earthquake. Yes, thank you. I was going to say it was either a hurricane or an earthquake, but it was an earthquake. And quickly, he had always had, throughout his entire career, Roberto Clemente, he had always had a humanitarian spirit about him. And he immediately began to galvanize the local population of Puerto Rico to donate supplies. And he had done an exceptionally well job in a very short period of time, matter of hours or days. He had collected many much needed supplies, but he did not want these supplies to be in the wrong hands, and he wanted to make sure that the masses of people received these supplies. So he personally committed to being on the plane. Unfortunately, however, the pilots and their instruments that they were using did not measure the weight of that plane up against what the power of the engines. And as soon as it took off, which was a very rainy and dark evening, it almost immediately went down off the coast of Puerto Rico, and everyone on board died instantly. And unfortunately for Roberto and his family, it was a major loss to the nation, obviously to baseball, but also to humanity in terms of his very generous spirit. And so because of that, many people in Nicaragua to this day still revere him. So it does not surprise me that here it was 10, 12, 13 years after this tragic accident, and here you are there in the early to mid 80s on the ground and still hearing his name being held up high and with reverence and respect. It doesn't surprise me.
After thanks you answer question ask the question, can we never hear about it, brother, yet?
Well, that's what I'm asking, because that's what I was saying. We don't know. So the next question I'm going to ask him is about Pedro Albizu Campos, whom I read about many years ago. All right, and I had his books in my bookstore, a book about him in my bookstore, and his writings and so on. And he was a critical figure in Puerto Rico's independence. So people do not understand. Puerto Rico is a colony of the U.S. And so a lot of people are not aware that there were people who have been fighting. He was the founder of the party. And then I'm going to ask you about Lolita Lebron, who was a woman who led protests with guns on the steps of the U.S. Congress, for which he was arrested and jailed for a number of years. And so I want to talk about that bit of history relative to one, Pedro Albizu Campos, and also Lolita Lebron, and the other persons, because I think one of them just died like 5 years ago. I forgot his name now. What his name? Yeah, but he was one of the 4 persons in this protest on this U.S. Congress fighting for Puerto Rico's independence. So if you could share the historian some of your perspective on both Campos as a founding father of Puerto Rican independence and the 4 people who were arrested for fighting for Puerto Rico's independence.
Sure. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, in terms of,
you still yes. Tell about Brother Ako. Like
yes,
I tell people Brother Ako humble, but everybody knows I ban Black and Bergen, and I like Bergen for my sister and brother. I especially want elder like Brother Ako, where that one scholar activist, like he read about the business. I know them people were Brother Ako to bring up. So he present very humble, but especially because we know the value of knowledge. And it so happened we're living in our imperialist, white supremacist reality. So we get quite a bit of PhD people passed on the review. But I couldn't have no colonial papers. Choose not forgot none. I tell anybody, any PhD could come in any discipline. I could just sit down and shut up, brother Ako, and run the show. Right?
Pedro Albizu Campos. I think it's more important for us to understand.
No. What Brother Ako don't bring to the show already, there's no way I can bring that. So I just want to recognize Brother Ako for what he bring to the show. But you see, brother Will, I could bring my brother, he's sharp. He ready. Go through, Brother Will, teach me.
Okay. Pedro Albizu Campos was a figure. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Yeah, hopefully you could have me back on to just dedicate a whole show to not only Albizu Campos, but the nationalist movement, the independence movement, and just looking at the role of Blacks in Puerto Rico in those subsequent movements. Because I think that's a very little talked about topic.
Exactly.
And as far as what is the Black experience within the context of these nationalist movements? Too often, we, meaning Black Puerto Ricans, we've made the mistake of not accentuating our race when it comes to nationalism and independence. And thus, when you read these names, these European names on the books, one has a default and presumes that all of these individuals we're discussing are white. When in fact, an individual as you've raised here, Albizu Campos, was in fact a very proud Black man who was an extremely gifted student when he graduated from the primary schools of Puerto Rico. He would eventually make his way to Harvard University, learn multiple languages, go on to Harvard Law School. Because he was a Black man during World War I, Puerto Rico, as you've indicated, is the longest and only, I would argue it's the only, but it's definitely the longest or oldest colony in the world today. First colonized in 1492, and then the United States in conquering Spain during the Spanish-American War in 1898 ceded Puerto Rico to the U.S., and it's been a colony of the United States since then. And so when you look at someone like Albizu Campos, that colonial period required, especially during World War I, that the United States grant, for the first time through the Jones Act of 1917, grant Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship, and thus they were immediately drafted into the U.S. Army. And Albizu Campos, because he was a Black man, he was drafted into the segregated U.S. Army. and served as an officer, first lieutenant. But when he got out 2 or 3 years later, he moved back to Puerto Rico and immediately began to rise through the ranks of the Independence Party there, the Nationalist Party, and eventually become the president or the highest ranking member of the Nationalist Party. And of course, when you're a colony, the United States does not take too much favor with individuals advocating for independence, especially a violent overthrow of the United States government, as Don Pedro Albizu Campo had advocated for. Thus, he lived really most of his life imprisoned because of his advocacy for total and complete independence from the United States. One of the critiques, of course, was U.S. style, what I would call laissez-faire capitalism, right? The level of exploitation of natural resources as well as human capital. And so the U.S., of course, did not want anyone disrupting the favorite status that Fortune 500 companies had, particularly the sugar companies, but also other areas of not only agriculture, but light manufacturing, and ultimately in the beginning in the 40s and 50s with Operation Bootstrap, pharmaceutical companies. And so one of the reasons why Puerto Rico is so valuable to the United States is its geographic position. And we saw that value in recently the United States invasion of Venezuela, but also it compromising other Caribbean countries throughout the region, including Trinidad, but also these military bases in Puerto Rico, and using those not only as a practicing range, but also a launching point to incursions into the Caribbean and other South American nations. For Albizu Campo, he foretold that and saw this coming because of U.S. empire and the growth of that empire throughout the 1880s and 1890s, and it would just accelerate and proliferate throughout the Caribbean throughout the early 1900s. And so that criticism that he had of that expansion of the military, the expansion of capitalism, the expansion of U.S. imperialism, that made him an enemy of the state. In fact, by the 1950s and 60s, he was imprisoned so long, many people thought that he began to become crazy and lose his mind when he began to reveal to visitors and others who would listen that he was secretly being injected with radiation. And even many of his supporters began to just question his reasoning and logic. But it would not be until until Bill Clinton entered the presidency in the early 90s, 1992 to 2000, that he would demand a release of the U.S. Department of Energy and other secret documents that revealed, in fact, they were injecting Don Pedro Albizu Campo with radiation in hopes of killing him. They were obviously engaging in human experimentation on him, as well as other political prisoners. And so that, I think, gives you some insight to the threat that he posed on U.S. imperialism. Here's an island that's 33 miles east to west, north to south, 100 miles east to west. Today, an island of no more than 3.5 to 4 million people. But yet, if you begin to talk about independence and self-determination, it will cause the arm of the law and the federal government apparatus to be extended. There are many, many FBI agents, as well as other covert operations occurring in Puerto Rico to this very day, in order to suppress and quash these kinds of movements, but also to observe and monitor those past activists who were involved, including those descendants of those family members of Don Pedro Albizu Campo, of Lolita Lebron that you mentioned as well. And so Pedro Albizu Campo is sort of, some have argued and given him the moniker as the Malcolm X of Puerto Rico, the father of nationalism of Puerto Rico. But for me, he was a proud black man who did not turn his back on his people, who refused to be compromised, to be bended. And so because he held steadfast and withstood many, many decades of imprisonment and that sacrifice and stress and trauma, including being experimented on, for him, for me anyways, and others, he's a national hero.
Big respect. We're past break time, but I never want to interrupt because this was really good. Most of we never heard this yet. Big respect to the two owner. Of course, you have a home at Sunday Review. I don't know how it take me so damn long to get you, but you don't worry about nothing. We'll bring you back. You know, we Puerto Rico expert now for sure. People, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We're here to commemorate the start of the construction of a STEAM pavilion.
It will be a place where students will be able to explore engineering, science, technology, arts, mathematics. A place where curiosity is encouraged, where ideas are truly put to the test.
This pavilion will feature state-of-the-art learning zones, including a fully equipped science laboratory for real-world experimentation, a modern recording studio to unleash creative and digital expression, an innovative maker space to encourage invention and prototyping, a collaborative learning street designed to foster spontaneous discussion and teamwork, dedicated storage rooms. Of course, we have quite a bit to do, so where will we put it? And facilities integrated with mechanical and electrical rooms to seamlessly support operations.
This new addition to our school will create more opportunities for us to conduct more experiments and those fun stuff like that.
I believe that this team project will help students to be able to put their skills to the test.
I am excited for this opportunity, and I'm pretty sure that it will benefit my colleagues and also myself.
These STEAM pavilions are an expansion from our investment that we made through the ITSAT STEAM Academy in Belize City. These pavilions will be expanded, one in each district across the country, and this is just the beginning.
Belize Electricity Limited is pleased to announce the holding of its 2025 Annual General Meeting at the
Life moves fast. Your connection should keep up. Need more credit? More data? A flex bundle that fits your lifestyle? With Smart Prepaid, they're a prepaid option for every lifestyle and budget, making it easy to stay connected wherever you are. Because with Smart Prepaid, you can connect on your terms. Purchase credit, data, flex bundles, prepaid plans, and all your favorite prepaid services at any Smart agent, Smart showroom, or simply dial *100# key. No stress, no waiting. Just fast, easy, convenient ways to stay connected every day. Smart Prepaid. Connect on your terms.
At Atlantic Bank, your convenience is our priority. Our contact center is designed to enhance your banking experience. With a wide range of customer service options, you save time and effort. You can easily call in to block or unblock your debit and credit cards, perform account inquiries, and access detailed card information. Whether you need assistance with online banking, merchant support, or general inquiries, our team is ready to help. For added convenience, if all operators are busy, you can leave your number and an operator will return your call as soon as possible to ensure you receive the support you need. Depending on your transaction type, we may need to verify your identity through a set of security questions. And remember, Atlantic Bank will never request your username or password for Atlantic Online via phone call, text, or email, ensuring your personal information remains safe and secure. Our support team is available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in both English and Spanish. Simply dial 223-1212. This is a dedicated line for our contact center. Atlantic Bank is committed to providing you with exceptional service and the tools you need to manage your finances conveniently and securely. Take full advantage of our easy-to-use contact center services today.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together. At Habet and Brothers Habet, celebrate your super handy dad with gifts he'll actually use and enjoy super savings all June. Like 15% off all power tools and Stanley hand tools, 20% off Vento PVC windows, 20% off Ascot porcelain tiles and 30% off Piso Forte ceramic tiles, and 40% off Sunlight windows and doors. Plus, stop in at Brothers Habet every Saturday for our veranda clearance blowout. And for every $50 you spend, get a chance to win a power tool every Saturday. Visit Habet and Brothers Habet today and give Dad something worthy of his super handiness. Happy Father's Day to all super handy dads.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Ufa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation.
Segment of Sunday Review. I just agree with pride. I like so proud that we brother they we like I don't overstand me and his brother have long journeys together. Like this have a real soul brother, right? Just a brother Will Guzman. Look, he got a lot of accolades behind the name, but I just want everyday brother and don't come to Belize already. Yeah, he my real brother. I have brother Mutota who da he run Sunday Review today here. Make me shut up. But I can say what I want to say, I will answer you.
So there are two things I wanted to discuss. I will do the one first. One of them is the issue he raised about Black Puerto Ricans, which is very important, which hopefully we could get more into when we discuss the Juneteenth thing. But more what I wanted to hear his opinion on is Operation Bootstrap, because that was a very important economic model that the U.S. tried to impose on the Caribbean. Okay, Arthur Lewis sort of made his name, the famous Caribbean Nobel laureate for economics, basically made his name on advocating for the Puerto Rican model. Now, incidentally, as Brother Will said, where he said his mother sewed pockets, I think, in a factory, right? Your mother sewed pockets in a factory. Well, part of the Puerto Rican model of economic development that was imposed on the English-speaking guy was similar. We had in Trinidad, for example, this idea of a garment industry. And what it was the entire garment came without sleeves, pockets, and they had our people sewing these things on with getting no skill, right? And calling this a garment industry, you see? And so this was the model that was advocated for our development. It's called the bootstrap, or it was called the Puerto Rican model. And this was supposed to be imposed on the rest of the Caribbean. It fell apart because one of the things you're dealing with when you're dealing with capitalism is that capitalism dishonest people by character. So what they did, when they came to the Caribbean, they got these what is called 10-year tax deferral. There's a tax holidays for 10 years. So they'll come to Trinidad, set up a garment factory. I think we had K and Elite and a couple of them. Set up a garment factory in Trinidad, get 10 years tax holiday where they don't pay any taxes. And after 10 years, they were supposed to pay the taxes. And what they will do, move the factory and put it in Barbados and get 10 years, and then leave Barbados, and that's what they did. And so that model, which was called the Puerto Rican model, undermined economic sovereignty and exploited workers in the Caribbean. So I wanted to hear his take on that, Operation Bootstrap, or the Puerto Rican model of economic development.
Sure. Thank you again for bringing that up. Very important topic. Operation Bootstrap really began in earnest in the mid-40s, 1945, 46. And what it was this economic model, as you've indicated, that offered financial subsidies and incentives to corporations who would set up shop in Puerto Rico, and they would then bypass federal U.S. laws as it related to minimum wage or a standard living wage. And so, for example, you take the Wilson Shoe Factory. When they established themselves in Puerto Rico in the early 60s, 61, 62, they were paying people anywhere between 45 to 65 cents an hour. They eventually made their way to 99 cents an hour by 1965. Versus the prevailing wage in the U.S. mainland at that time was $1.25 to $1.50 an hour. So you had wages being suppressed by 20-30% or more. And so that was part of the economic model of Operation Bootstrap, which was, how do we exploit the labor? Puerto Rico back then was perceived as an island with excess or a surplus of population. In other words, that people were having too many children, and this is where you get the covert operations of suppressing or forcing upon birth control methods, including sterilization, being forced upon the women, and specifically Black Puerto Rican women, but also the origins of the birth control pill. Many people forget are in Puerto Rico. And so when you have the women's rights and the women's revolution of the 1960s and 70s here in the United States, all that is made possible, at least those sexual freedoms, are made possible through the advent of the pill, which was experimented on and created and manufactured and mass produced in Puerto Rico. So Operation Bootstrap gave many financial incentives, many tax subsidies and tax incentives to pharmaceutical companies, as well as light manufacturing. And that was deemed a successful model. However, right around the time that Operation Bootstrap is being launched is around the same time that you have a dramatic decrease in prices for round trip or one-way tickets to New York City or to the mainland. And so you have this massive influx of Puerto Rican migration beginning in the 1940s and continuing through the late 60s and early 70s. So you have that almost 20-year period there, almost 30-year period there of Puerto Rican migration. And this is where you have these kind of famous, Puerto Rican enclaves. Just today, in fact, as we speak, is the Puerto Rican Day Parade down Fifth Avenue. Over 1 million people are expected to be there, and in the beautiful weather of New York City. The New York Knicks just won the championship yesterday, and they have a Puerto Rican player. And so you have this annual celebration of Puerto Rican culture down Fifth Avenue because of the entrenchment of Puerto Rican migration in communities. Now, today, ironically, the largest Puerto Rican community is not in San Juan or in East Harlem. It is now in Kissimmee and Orlando, Florida. And so here again, the external economic models are impacting Puerto Rican migration. What's drawing Puerto Ricans to Orlando is obviously jobs, Disney World, and the rest of the tourism industry, where they want low-wage bilingual workers who have the perception of being submissive and docile and will not demand unions and unionization. And that really is at the core of Operation Bootstrap, is really how do we circumvent and avoid unions from establishing or creating a foothold on the island of Puerto Rico. Now, fast forward to the late 90s, early 2000s, during the Clinton administration, where he gets rid of some of those tax incentives. So you see the pharmaceuticals immediately leaving Puerto Rico. And so it's a dying industry. You still have a few strongholds there, but for the most part, the island is almost completely reliant on the tourism industry and on other tax incentives for external or foreign capital to come in to invest in real estate and in other areas. But for the most part, it's what I call a parasitic form of capitalism, where you rely on foreigners or non-Puerto Ricans to allow the economy to thrive.
You had a quote you wanted to read, Brother Will?
Oh, yes. I just really wanted I had a real brief statement on Juneteenth, since I know that was the topic that I was asked to discuss. And I'm reading this only in hopes of that it might spawn some questions. But basically, I was going to say that Frederick Douglass famously said, "Freedom is a road seldom traveled by the multitudes." And while this prophetic statement may be true, the fact is, for African Americans in the state of Texas and elsewhere throughout the United States, June 19th, 1865, freedom was a road traveled by the multitudes. And so when we look at the history of Juneteenth, it wasn't necessarily that African Americans actually found out that they were supposed to be free on June 19th, 1865. They had known that for many years prior, right? They were aware of January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation, for example. They were aware of September of 1862, 100 days before the Emancipation Proclamation, where Lincoln gave a conditional option for the South to return back to the Union. Right, the South, these 11 racist Confederate states had formed their own nation, the Confederacy. They broke away from the United States, and Lincoln's task was to make the Union whole again. His ultimate goal was not to free African Americans. He was forced by hand to do that by Black activists such as Frederick Douglass, but other African Americans who were engaging in activism with their feet, by running away from the front lines of the Deep South, by running away to Union forces in the Union lines and up north, by running away from their former plantations. They were engaged in a form of activism, and they were basically voting, if you will, with their feet. But Juneteenth is an important day for Black folks throughout this country and for New World Africans. In other words, Africans throughout the African diaspora. Although New World Africans may have different days that we celebrate as Emancipation Days, such as August 1st in Jamaica, August 1st in Barbados and other parts of the English-speaking Caribbean, or March 22nd, Emancipation Day in Puerto Rico, or September 22nd, January 1st, or June 19th, or even May 20th here in the United States in various parts, including Tennessee, Florida, Washington, D.C., etc. Here in these regions of the country, the reality is that it is a significant day rooted in history. History is nothing less than the art of collective memory. Only those who have no memories of themselves, their origins, their accumulation of experiences can be described as having no history. Even so, the absence of recollection does not negate the presence of history. As the shadow of the past lurks and lives in the present, these truths are as valid in the lives of individuals as in the chronicles of nations. We are all the products of our past. We may not have known our great-grandparents or our great-great-grandparents, but that does not mean that we are not their descendants. The fact that we do not know them or do not recognize them does not mean that our looks, our mannerisms, our genetic characteristics and our character traits have not been deprived or derived rather from them. As the great Afro-Cuban poet Nicholas Guillen said, quote, "Shadows that only I can see, my two grandfathers go with me," unquote. The past is a shadow that is always hovering over the present, and the more conscious that one is of the shadow of history, the easier it is to find comfort in the present and the possibility of the future. This is why African Americans view Juneteenth with such importance. We celebrate it as an important element in the cultivation of memory. As St. Lucian poet and Nobel laureate Derek Walcott has said that, quote, "We make too much of the long groan that underlies the past," unquote. Yet, a people must never forget their pain, but the scars of the past must serve to heal their future. History must always be celebrated. For no matter the depth of the pain, there is always resistance, resilience, survival, and victory to celebrate. It is only at the end of history that there is no reason to celebrate. And history only ends when the people are completely decimated. So for us, Juneteenth is a time for revisiting the trauma of slavery, but more significantly, it is also a time for reevaluating the miracle of survival. It is a time to restore the pride of resilience and resistance. It is a moment to recognize the remarkable capacity for generations of a people who have been through the most epic holocaust of enslavement, which began in this country in 1619 and legally ended in 1865. But between 1441 and 1888, West Africans were, as an act of war, kidnapped against their will and taken away from their homelands in chains. It was the largest forced migration the world has ever known, which resulted in nearly 100 million Africans dying a horrific death. In order to preserve and maintain the institution of chattel slavery, the constant theme of daily violence was necessary. Juneteenth celebrations represent the triumphant of our collective spirit. It serves to remind us that emancipation is the unfettering of the spirit, because although we were told in Texas that emancipation had arrived on June 19th, 1865, there were many among our ancestors who had always been free. In spite of the chains that bound their bodies and the whips that lacerated their skins, their spirits were always free and unfettered. It is the spirit of these women and men of fire that enabled our survival and victory as a people against the odds of yesterday, and it is that unconquerable spirit that must inspire our actions today and infuse our tomorrows. Juneteenth must be a chronicle of those courageous women and men whose spirit embodied that will to overcome all odds. It must always remind us of our strength and remind us that we have a special unique burden on our shoulders, which is to honor the memory of our ancestors who survived the Ma'afa, the terrible occurrence which attempted to rob us of our humanity, but failed in this endeavor. Juneteenth represents our attempt to become whole again, to become holistic, and to restore elements of our humanity. It represents victory over our oppressors and allows us to celebrate our ancestors' fortitude, strength of character, and resiliency. I'll end on this quote by prominent historian Joseph K. Zerbo of Burkina Faso. "Africa is like Osiris. It has been torn apart and scattered over the earth. It is our responsibility to put it back together." Happy Juneteenth.
Well, clearly, you've been over-prepared. Difficult, Will. We'll have to take one quick break. But when we come back, I want Brother Akon and Brother Will reason about why the conversation about the Caribbean, Puerto Rico in particular, is very relevant to this Juneteenth conversation. Today at June 14th, Juneteenth will be in 5 days, and that's why we have Brother Will Guzman here to talk about Juneteenth. August 1st is recognized as African Emancipation Day in Belize. And let it be known that both the United States government and the Belize government chose to make Juneteenth and August 1st a public and bank holiday in 2021, both countries. We're going to take one short break and come right back. Call everybody on a lucky and got us a high reasoning. Like my sister Fanta said, when they get real our story, what the European they call his story lessons today. Big thanks, Brother Akka. Big thanks, Brother Will. Break time.
Benny's is kicking off Father's Day with popping deals for dad in the month of June. Visit a Benny's near you and get store-wide discounts on selected items such as Milwaukee and Axie Power Tools, Charbroil Barbecue Grills, car care products, Karcher pressure washers, and much, much more. Make dad happy with popping deals for dad in June, only at Benny's.
Life moves fast. Your connection should keep up. Need more credit? More data? A flex bundle that fits your lifestyle? With Smart Prepaid, they're a prepaid option for every lifestyle and budget, making it easy to stay connected wherever you are. Because with Smart Prepaid, you can connect on your terms. Purchase credit, data, flex bundles, prepaid plans, and all your favorite prepaid services at any Smart agent, Smart showroom, or simply dial *100# key. No stress, no waiting. Just fast, easy, convenient ways to stay connected every day. Smart Prepaid. Connect on your terms.
We're here to commemorate the start of the construction of a STEAM pavilion.
It will be a place where students will be able to explore engineering, science, technology, arts, mathematics. A place where curiosity is encouraged, where ideas are truly put to the test.
This pavilion will feature state-of-the-art learning zones, including a fully equipped science laboratory for real-world experimentation, a modern recording studio to unleash creative and digital expression, an innovative maker space to encourage invention and prototyping, a collaborative learning street designed to foster spontaneous discussion and teamwork, dedicated storage rooms, of course, we have quite a bit to do, so where will we put it, and facilities integrated with mechanical and electrical rooms to seamlessly support operations.
This new addition to our school will create more opportunities for us to conduct more experiments and those fun stuff like that.
I believe that this team project will help students to be able to put their skills to the test.
I am excited for this opportunity, and I'm pretty sure that it will benefit my colleagues and also myself.
These STEAM pavilions are an expansion from our investment that we made through the ITSAT STEAM Academy in Belize City. These pavilions will be expanded, one in each district across the country, and this is just the beginning.
Paperworks Entertainment and SJ Promotion presents the official Belizean Jamaican link-up, the Father's Day edition. It's an all-white day party on Sunday, June 21st at the Belize Airport Authority parking lot, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Featuring the international reggae dancehall singing sensation stage boss, Wayne Wonder. To mash up the stage alongside the General Super G for the first time in Belize, Steely Bashman, plus Belize's top DJs. Get your general tickets for $60 and VIP for $150 at Madisco, Stone Music Outlet, and VIP Wireless. And lock the date for the official Belizean Jamaican link-up all-white day party on Sunday, June 21st at the Belize Airport Authority parking lot, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Sponsored by
En Atlantic Bank, tu comodidad es nuestra prioridad. Nuestro centro de contacto está diseñado para mejorar tu experiencia bancaria, con una amplia gama de opciones de servicio al cliente. Ahorras tiempo y esfuerzo. Puedes llamar fácilmente para bloquear o desbloquear tus tarjetas de débito y crédito. realizar consultas de cuentas y acceder a información detallada de tus tarjetas. Ya sea que necesites asistencia con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales, nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m. en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte un servicio excepcional y las herramientas que necesitas para administrar tus finanzas de manera conveniente y segura. Aprovecha al máximo nuestro servicio del centro de contacto.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
Some hands do more than carry. They prepare, they fix, they comfort. They keep a home moving in ways few people notice. And even when the day is done, they are still thinking of home. For the months of May and June, we celebrate the hands that hold the home together, offering you 25% off on tiles, lights, fans, ACs, gardening supplies, and more, both in-store and online. Thank you, moms and dads, from Builders Hardware.
Belize me come from the Belize City area, 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master, talking about the head on the Belize and dollar, because patriots, all people who love them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This stuff we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This stuff we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area, 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master, talking about the head on the Belize and dollar, because patriots, all people who love them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland.
Of Sunday Review, Brother Will Guzman, Brother Mutota, and me, Sister YaYa. I tell you, them break conversations and just juicy. For in this segment, Brother and Brother Will, on a continue the reasoning on the connection between Juneteenth and the Caribbean in particular.
And that's a question for me?
Yeah, when we had the conversation earlier, so I just said to bring it forward publicly.
Sure, indeed. I was and Brother Akko mentioned this as well, is I think they're intimately connected, because what's happening in the Caribbean, especially during the 18th and 19th century, you have these liberation movements, not only in the Caribbean, but also in the mainland. So, for example, when you look at David Walker's appeal and him mysteriously dying in 1830, where he's advocating for us to take a more aggressive stance against the institution of slavery. And then, of course, you have Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831, one of the more successful uprisings. And I'm not too far from where that happened here in Durham, in North Carolina, just about an hour or two away from here in Virginia. But when you look at what's happening in the Caribbean, these kinds of byproducts happening in the U.S. are getting their inspirations from the Haitian Revolution. And so when you look at Juneteenth, there is that kind of connection of freedom, self-determination, liberation, and speaking for ourselves and dictating to ourselves what holidays and cultural activities that we want to promote. And so that's where you have, I think, this Caribbean connection in terms of inspiration for liberation, right? We know the English-speaking Caribbean had already been emancipated, if you will, by the 1830s on August 1st. So by, the 1880s or 1890s, we've already had a 50-year, celebration or commemoration of emancipation. The question becomes, though, and this is one of the discussion points mentioned right before the break, is that these economic systems that people promote, and thus it forces us to reevaluate that old adage or cliche that not all skin folk are kinfolk, right? In other words, just because someone is black does not necessarily mean that they are for us. They may be, as an asset to empire. And so are we prepared to expose that? And I think Brother Akko did that so eloquently throughout the break there in critiquing past U.S. political leaders and their, promotion of, laissez-faire capitalism and militarism and so many other vestiges of exploitation that hurt not only Caribbean people, but African peoples in general.
Big respect, Brother Akko. What are the relevance for you? You want to add anything to what Brother Will just said?
Well, the first thing we have to understand is that just how capitalism is a global phenomenon through what we call neoliberalism and globalization. The whole system of the slave trade and they have a way of using language now to sometimes obscure things. So we are now using the term the transatlantic slave trade. I remember someone saying the Atlantic Ocean never enslaved anybody. It was the European slave trade. Europeans is who did that. Okay? And so this was a global phenomenon based on the European world. And when Haiti, for example, fought every major Western power, one of the things people forgot is that Haiti didn't just fight France. They fought other Europeans who came to conquer them. And they destroyed them. I think the only Europeans that fought inside the Haitians were the Poles, and they spared them. Okay? But every other European nation they defeated. Okay? So when Haiti established its independence in 1804, it sent shockwaves through the American slave system in the South, particularly in the South. So this is therefore a direct connection between what happened in the Caribbean and what happened in the U.S. Additionally, there was an American president, I don't remember his name, and he was actually born in St. Kitts, or Secretary Hamilton, I think it was. Right? So this plantation system, right? Remember that in the Caribbean, the errant your Italian navigator, Cristobal Colon, came here first before he got to the U.S. And so the system was established. So there was a direct link between what's happening in the Caribbean and the U.S. There's even some historical suggestion, that one of the some key figures in the Haitian Revolution, I don't remember which one it was actually a slave in Louisiana before he came to Haiti. I think it was Desailly, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. So you have had these connections. So what happened in the Caribbean would have impacted the U.S., And to give you a most recent example of this, how these historical events are important. One of the reasons why the U.S. was so, what you may call, insistent on the destruction of the Grenada Revolution, they saw the Grenada Revolution as more dangerous than the Cuban Revolution, because they said Grenadians were one black and they spoke English. And therefore, if that model existed, the effect it was going to have on African Americans. So there's always been this connection between what happened in the Caribbean. In addition to that, also, a number of prominent African-American freedom fighters had links to the Caribbean. Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan, right? Even recently, we found out that Maya Angelou's grandfather and her father were from Trinidad. You see? So you have had this influence. So what happens in the Caribbean very much impacts the United States. And this is why the United States is so very adamant, if you want to call it that, on insisting that we are kept on its heel, because they fear the bad example or the good example, you want to call it, from our point of view, of a revolutionary Caribbean, not just the Spanish people, but that particular part of the Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean. So you have had C.L.R. James, who was influential in shaping a generation of African-American left, and who was deported from the U.S. You had Claudia Jones, a very prominent Trinidadian Marxist, who wrote on the book left of Karl Marx is written about her, who was also deported by the U.S. authorities for her work among Africans in the U.S. You have people like the guy from what's his name, Virgin Island. We had the author Brian
Hubert H. Harrison.
Hubert H. Harrison, who was considered the Black Socrates in Harlem. You see, then his lineage countryman, Arthur Schomburg, who was a Puerto Rican, who founded the Schomburg Institute, the most prominent Black museum in the U.S. right now. You see, so all of these things have given the ruling class and the white elites in America the fear of hell that anything that happens in the Caribbean could impact the U.S. in the way the Haitian Revolution impacted the U.S. slave system at the time.
Of course, you can't forget ancestor Marcus Garvey.
Of course.
Okay,
I would add the author of Left of Karl Marx.
Yeah.
That gives basically the biography of Claudia Jones, a sister from Trinidad, is Carolyn Boyce Davies.
Carolyn Boyce Davies, yeah.
That's someone you should get on your show. And I'll try to send you her email so you could invite her.
Thanks, brother. I know Brother Akko know her as well. Let me get your final thoughts on Juneteenth and African emancipation overall. What's absolutely important for everyday African descendants to know? Like most holidays, I believe people just thankful they're on holiday. They don't even know why it's a holiday, why it even matters. One of the challenges we're having in the Caribbean is that the state is co-opting these moments of remembrance of African ancestresses and ancestors and moving away, because usually they want grassroots organization like Better Educational Foundation. We started recognizing this 13 years ago, thanks to Virginia Echoes, and then I followed, is that it's a moment to really sit and reflect and remember the sacrifices that were made for making we still there, and that we have one duty to live differently for us and our unborn children. Instead, oftentimes the state turned it into ambashment, alcohol, music. There's no serious moment of reflection and accountability of ourselves and others. So it's very important when we have moments like this that those who have the space really take a moment to remind ourselves that we have a duty to learn and apply what we learn because of the people who made sacrifices for us to still be here. Brother Will and then Brother Akko.
Well, I would just simply say that you're right. I think of the great intellectual Malana Karinga, who said that what ends up happening regarding these kinds of commemorations are the foods, fashions, and festivals. And all that is fine for us to engage in. But really, as you've indicated, it's really a moment of reflection for us to organize and mobilize, to use these kinds of commemorations or these holidays as markers to remind us or recommit ourselves to the struggle. And that struggle should include or entail a critique of not only the economic system that's currently exploiting us, but also how can we create a more humane society. And that's going to require discipline, sacrifice, and obviously commitment, as indicated. So I would say one is to be mindful that that Black joy is extremely important and could be revolutionary. That's what I always think of when I think of, carnival season in the Caribbean. So Black joy becomes a very overt way of resistance, right? They want us to wallow in our sorrows and to be in a constant state of depression. So Juneteenth can be, and it's okay to celebrate with the music and other vices that we may engage in, including barbecue and everything else. However, let's first and foremost let it be about one, honoring the past, honoring the memory of our ancestors. And the only way we can honor them is to organize, mobilize for a better future.
Well, Brother Akko?
So I want to address the statement you made about the issue of the state co-opting these important celebrations, right? So the first thing, in my opinion, that one must recognize is that the state is an illegitimate entity in the Caribbean, right? It is illegitimate. So the state seeks legitimacy by co-opting important historical moments, because these moments are dear to the people. They represent their ancestral struggles and so on. So the state has no interest in advancing this as a serious institution, but it recognizes the political, social, and cultural value of these things. So it co-opts it and redirects it in a way to dilute their meaning, their form, and their potential for future challenges to the states and for future revolutions. So I think that's something we must appreciate, right? That the state will always dilute these important holidays to distort their meaning. Okay? So, for example, in Trinidad, I was part of the organization, the National Joint Action Committee, that lobbied for years to make emancipation a holiday. And we were successful in the 1980s, after many years writing to the state and so on. So, and subsequently, other Caribbean territories, I think we were the first in the world to make emancipation their holiday, right? So, and then Jamaica, I think Guyana and others subsequently followed and made it into a national holiday. Because in Jamaica, it was Independence Day was on August the 1st, and they were forced to move it and replace it with Emancipation Day. But again, this is what the state in the Caribbean does. And there were others. There was a man in Trinidad called Mozumbo Lazare, who was one of the first in the Caribbean to advocate for a holiday. Because in Trinidad, Emancipation Day was Discovery Day. We celebrated Columbus. When I was a child, we celebrated Discovery Day. And there were communities in which Black people would dress up like Columbus and, and recreate the landing of Columbus until we began to advocate and it was changed. You see? So when you look at that, and to get back to Mozumbo Lazare, he advocated to change it from during the colonial time, to change discovery to emancipation. And it was done for a short time, I think 2 years. And then they restored Discovery Day. So the states we have in the Caribbean, despite flags and independence, they are continuum or Professor, what's his name, Hope Adu said, it is adjustment and continuity. These are states of adjustments and continuity. They are the same colonial states morphed into neo-colonial states. Despite some of our academics call them post-colonial, they're not post-colonial, they are neo-colonial states, new colonization. And so the fact that they celebrate emancipation has to do with the demand of the people. And the fact that they make it an abashment, as you call it, is to dilute the importance, the historical significance, and the other potentials for transformation. That's what I would say on that particular issue.
Big thanks. But before we go, we had a conversation during the break where I want to bring forward, because you know how you're going to land. I asked Brother Akko if him to watch the World Cup. Well, I never know the kind of worms I opened up. Brother Akko, can I ask you publicly?
Yes.
I never ready for the answer. Are you what? And then the MCO to the Harlan Wagner, he jumped right in and agreed with Brother Akko immediately. Brother Akko, You don't watch the World Cup?
No, I don't, and I will not. I am boycotting the World Cup because of the hypocrisy, the inconsistencies with FIFA. The fact that you could take a warmonger racist and give him a peace prize, it tells you everything about FIFA. FIFA punished Russia for the so-called invasion, but rewards Israel, the Zionist state of Israel. So it is inconsistent. And as I was saying to you, Sister YaYa, there are forms of protest we have to engage in. We may call it passive protest. And this is a passive form of protest, because people only listen to when the economics is impacted. And that you have in your TV, you have a little box that they measure everyone who looks at that World Cup in order to demand what kind of sponsorships they will get and so on and so forth. And if we just turn off our TV, right, it will impact their bottom line and would have done the world a service. Okay? You have situations where African footballers are coming and they're being treated like drug dealers. Strip search at the airport. Okay? You have an African referee, the top referee in the world. He got a visa when he came into Miami. They denied, they sent him back. So these are things that we should not be supporting by looking at the World Cup. That's my view. Right? You know, we have to learn that there are things bigger than just our own entertainment. You know, and this to me is an issue that we should be taking a little more. It doesn't cost us anything not to watch the World Cup, but it will cause a big impact should we not look at it. And that is my view on it.
Big thanks, Brother Akase. Brother Will alone send up black hands, the clap when you talk. Let me get final views from both of you, Brother Will. Trust I believe you to come back. Final thoughts, Brother Will, on today's experience here in Sunday Review.
Just thank you again for having me. It's been an honor, a pleasure, and if you want me back, especially because I think Juneteenth is tied in with Frederick Douglass's famous speech of what to the slave is the 4th of July, right? This independence for the U.S. nation, and that is the same day he said it in 1852 is July 5th. July 5th falls on a Sunday, so hopefully your topic on July 5th will be what to the slave is the 4th of July by Frederick Douglass.
I don't have a guest book for July 5th, but I will have to ask that guest if I could reschedule her and bring Will back for that July 5th, because the timing is, it matters, because we come to talk about Juneteenth, we start to talk about Puerto Rico, bomb Puerto Rico, parade today, and I really accept alignment. There are no coincidences in life. So big thanks, Brother Will Guzman. We look forward to that booking at 2 years from you. And we appreciate your take time out for reason with this today, Brother Akko.
I wanted to ask him a question which I know he will not have the time to answer, but I'll ask it anyway and hope possibly in the future. The difference between why people call themselves Latinos and Hispanics. And the other thing is, you know, people like Jennifer Lopez, who I am not particularly a great fan of, they have a way of erasing blackness among Puerto Ricans. That whenever you ask them anything, they say, oh, I'm a Puerto Rican. What does that mean, really? Puerto Rican is a nationality. You're right, there is a culture that's associated with that nation. But to me, it's a way of erasing blackness, which is a point he made earlier in terms of when we spoke about Albizu Campo. So that was a question I wanted to ask you, but we wouldn't have time to answer that question.
One quick 2-3 minutes, Brother Will. Quick.
Real quickly, I'll just say this. She, as a white woman, wants to obscure or evade that question because what she's doing is capitalizing and exploiting black music, black culture for her own financial gain. So thus, being quote unquote Puerto Rican is more convenient than to her to be able to say, I'm a white woman. Second, the colonialism that occurred in Puerto Rico from not only the United States, but also from Spanish authorities dictated that race becomes a non-issue in order to not bring attention to those local black populations. Up until the 1830s and 1840s, and even as high as the 1850s, the black Puerto Rican population was as high as 50-60%. Today, it's less than 20%. And so you still have a significant, even that 20%, 800,000 to 1 million black Puerto Ricans on the island and throughout the diaspora who are proud of their African heritage, who refuse to capitulate to white supremacy, and that want to uphold and point out the inconsistencies of race, both on the island and in the U.S. But yeah, I'd love to. That's another great topic for discussion.
The description of Latino or Hispanic, quickly.
Is one, Hispanic was a U.S. term created in the early 70s by the Richard Nixon administration in order for the U.S. Census really to allow Latinos to identify with their Spanish or European ancestry. Latino, of course, has a more complicated origin, although it still has a European connection. So it's still complicated, but I could get deeper in that at some other time. But yes, it's Hispanic is more Eurocentric.
Big thanks, Brother Will Guzman. Could depend from Brother Akko for put one last one before we go. But big thanks, Brother Akko. I really value Brother Akko's knowledge and expertise for make we have the kind of conversation we had this morning. And Brother Will, comfortable one thing, Brother Akko, Kara, wrong? Kara, bring her right back.
It's all connected.
Big thanks, Brother Will. We want to thank our security guard, Brother Shane Flowers here at XTV, Brother Harlan Wagner downstairs at Creme Radio. We have Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G. The show will repeat at 5:30 today on XTV local channel. Remember, you could listen to this conversation at any time and share the link by going to Facebook and YouTube, XTV Belize. Give thanks to the solidarity of our people, our community members, and always thankful to Brother Akko for saying, make we reason about Caribbean stories, Caribbean news stories, and the people behind those stories. So until next Sunday, remember, on the organized people, I save the people.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, Brother Will.
Thank you.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Ufa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me the maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head from the Belize and dollar because no Guatemala. This time we the fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This